Ben here. Today I'm talking about Scotland's native people, the Picts. If you were interested in languages, humanities, and cultural stuff, why not subscribe now so you don't miss any of the action, and leave me a like below, and I'd really appreciate it. Thanks. Who were the Picts and what was their language like? To answer that, we have to go all the way back to Rome, because the Picts didn't actually leave recorded literature themselves or anything about themselves in terms of writing. What we have comes from their interaction with the periphery of civilization. Now I want you to look at this map here. The Etruscans and the Basques are pre-Indo-European peoples before the Latins, Celts, and Germans came into Europe. Now, the Picts are definitely not a pre-Indo-European people, but they do have faint echoes, perhaps, of these pre-Indo-European cultures. For instance, they chose kings upon the matriarchal or the mother's line, which is very uncommon, actually. And the Basques, for instance, do have a heritage of transferring property along the mother's line. So we may have some echoes of that in the Picts, but we do know that they did speak a Celtic language. Keep that in mind as we go forward. After the Romans took over the Etruscans' territory, they continued to expand, and they absorbed, assimilated, enslaved, and killed pretty much everyone in their path. The Ligurians, and then they came into Gaul. See my video on the Gaulish language and people, and they fought a series of long wars over Gaul. And what we have in this period in relation to the Picts, we have waves of immigrants or refugees fleeing Gaul, present-day France and Belgium, possibly into Britain. And it had a knock-on effect. We have a series of societies in chaos. And we have a lack of accurate historical records. We have people in southwestern France which are called the Pictones, and this does not mean that they are related to the actual Picts. The name for Picti in Latin came much later. Maybe it had a similar meaning, but it doesn't mean that people from the coast of southwest France sailed all the way up to northeast Scotland on the other side of the seacoast and settled there. But we don't actually know. When Rome invaded Britain, Britain spoke mostly a Brythonic language related to present-day Welsh. Ireland spoke a Celtic language as well, a Goidelic language, which is the fancy way of saying comes from Ireland. And these two branches of the Celtic languages are different, but they are very related to each other. The people in the north of Britain may have spoken a third branch of Celtic languages, but this would have been closer to Brythonic than it was to Irish. Just from some of the names that we have left over in terms of place names, we can tell that it was closer to Brythonic. As Rome expanded north, it brought Latin with it to the settlements that it founded specifically in the south of Britain, and the Brythonic language began to change as Rome progressed further into Britain and towards present-day Scotland. The Welsh language was directly impacted by this as it began to form in the later stages of the Roman Empire. The people in the north were not affected by this Latin to that extent. And so as Rome reached Scotland, it found that it couldn't subdue the tribes in the north. And it built two walls, the Antian Wall and the Hadrian's Wall. And between these two walls, it put confederati or client state kingdoms. One of these was a Gododin. It's here that the Welsh language was really born, this fusion between the Latin culture and the native British language. But the Picts, or the people at this period in history known as the Caledoni, were not part of that. They were not Latinized, and their language continued to evolve without the direct assimilation of Latin into their language to such an extent as was seen south of these walls. And at this point, what we think is that Welsh, or what would become Welsh, and Pictish truly began to diverge further, if they were not diverged already, and would have become truly separate linguistic categories. The people in the north may have had some pre-Indo-European influences already which made them different, but we don't know exactly what those linguistic variations between them and the rest of the Brythonic speakers was. We have no evidence. South of the walls, the Britons took words from Latin into their language like braich for arm, fenester for window, guider for glass, gwir for truth, and these came from these Latin words. Notice that the last two changed the V sound to a Q sound, and this is important as we move into Pictland because the sounds of that shift appear to have remained in Pictish, that they began words with this G or G sound. This suggests that Pictish was more closely aligned with the Brythonic branches than it was with the Goidelic branches in the late 1st century by the writer Tacitus, and going into the 3rd and 4th centuries, we do have the first glimpses of the Picts coming into history through the eyes of Roman writers like the historian Tacitus. And we get mention of Caledonis, and this is quite a peculiar name if you speak Welsh like I do, because Caled means hard, and Dionys, it came from a noun ending meaning the peoples or the ones, so you get Caledonis could have meant the hardy people, the tough people. And if you've ever been to the Highlands of Scotland or seen them, it takes quite a tough people to be up in those high lands and then able to amass a group of people to take out a Roman legion. These were not simpletons we're talking about here. They held Rome at bay when the Gauls and the rest of Britain had failed. We don't have the name of the tribes and the confederation which was formed to fight Rome, but we do have evidence that there was a confederation of tribes in Pictland which joined together under leadership to fight Rome. And they won some serious battles. They lost some too, but they did hold Rome at bay, which is quite a significant achievement, and it kept them, perhaps, from losing their original identity that those south of Hadrian's Wall did, which they became another people, eventually the Welsh. In 83 AD, Tacitus writes about the first known Pict we have by name, Calgacus, and this chieftain, he appears to have led a confederation in battle against the Romans. By the year 297, we have Latin sources from south of the wall calling these people the Picti, the painted ones. And we begin to get glimpses of them as traders, raiders, and fighters, and they're renowned for their prowess in war, quite feared as well. As Rome was leaving in the year 402 AD, we get a poem from Claudius Claudianus, and he writes that the Picts, as they were dying, it looked like the life was leaving iron wrapped around their bodies. And what he's saying is that the tattoos looked like iron put into the skin of the Picts. Venit et extremis legio pratenta Britannis, caius scoto dat frena, truci feroce notatas, perlegit examines, picto moriente figuras. We have records from the early medieval times, and the Welsh laws were created, and in there we get glimpses that the Welsh perhaps thought that they were from these people. The Kingdom of Gwynedd was founded in the 5th century here in Aberconwy, and What this did is it brought culture from Scotland down into Wales, and we don't know exactly where those people came from in Scotland, but we do have a couple lines that say Ní roeddent y Pictiaid am yr hen Gymru. And what this means is that there's a faint possibility that those who came down and established the Kingdom of Gwynedd were from Pictland, but we don't know. It could have been more from the area around Edinburgh, but we don't know. After Rome left, we know of at least 7 Pictish kingdoms emerging in North and East Scotland, and these gradually began to coalesce around the strongest kingdom. That would have been Gwerthir, as reconstructed by Welsh academics, but we come to know it as Fortriu, located around Moray area, chiefly around the remnants of a fort we now call Burghead, and this was on a promontory. And we have a lot of promontory forts being built by the Picts, and they were a people familiar with the sea. They raided far down the coast of eastern England. Gradually, Gwerthir, or Fortriu, came to dominate and began expanding a high kingship over the other Pictish kingdoms, and an identity of a Pictish state in the early Middle Ages began to emerge. We do get saints like Columba talking about the Picts, and we do get more mention of them. And it appears the kingdom of the Picts, or what was Fortriu, expanding over the other Pictish kingdoms and becoming a single kingdom, it chose the right position. It had to choose between the Irish or the Celtic Church and the church coming out of Northumbria in the south. And it did choose the Northumbrian side just for probably pragmatic reasons. You're on the same landmass and you have to fight these people. In 685, the Pictish kingdom defeated the Anglians in battle, winning its political independence for quite a significant portion of the region, present-day northern Scotland. And as it was able to find this peace with Northumbria briefly and able to expand its borders, it actually put its son, the king put his son on the throne of Doriata to the west. And this had a strange effect. It Gaelicized Pictland. As the next century wore on, it was the Viking Age, and the Vikings attacked the main power base of Pictland, and this was Burghead, and this was destroyed by the Vikings. And after this period, it's really one of decline for the Picts and gradual Gaelicization as Doriata takes advantage of this weakness on behalf of the Vikings interfering in Pictland. We don't think that it's violent per se in the terms of the Gaelicization, but the Picts gradually leave behind their culture and language and they become Gaelicized. Now we have lots of place names like these. The Picts during this time in which they had the Christianity come in gave us a mesmerizing display of artwork that they've left in stone. Here are a couple of those for you. So we don't really have a lot of information on the Picts. We have mostly the interaction of others' relation with them, and we don't really have what they saw about themselves. We don't even know what they called themselves. But they definitely left a deep imprint upon Scotland today, and the DNA of that region of Scotland is markedly different from the rest of the British Isles. So their imprint is still there. And you have lots of place names that are a fusion sometimes between Pictish and Irish, or Pictish and Scots, and it's definitely a unique element. It has endured in that way. By refusing the Celtic Church and defeating Northumbria in battle, the Picts fused British and Irish cultural identities in the midst of an Atlantic culture that involved Orkney, the Norse, the Britons in the south, which would become the Welsh and Strathclyde, and they fused a new identity that was multicultural. And in this period, we see a Gaelicization. The old Pictish culture is vanishing in this period as the rulers of Pictland had put their kings upon the throne of Dalriata, but Dalriata then brought their culture into Pictland, and it became a Gaelic-speaking region very slowly, and many words of Pictish may have been absorbed into the Scots Gaelic language, which is one of the things perhaps that makes Scottish Gaelic a bit different from Irish. So there may be a remnant of the Pictish people in what makes Scottish Gaelic a bit special. The Picts never really went away because of this multiculturalism. They absorbed many different cultures, and by doing that they became Scots, and they formed the basis of the Kingdom of Alba and then Scotland. And so it's not that they went away and that they lost their language, which they did lose their language, but it's rather more that their culture changed and adapted with the times and became something new. Hey, thank you for watching this video, and if you liked this video, why not subscribe, like, and leave me a comment. Really appreciate it. Hey, thanks for watching.